Dagger pair. What's up with this weapon? Is it any good in solo PvP? What tier is it? And should you play it? To answer this question, I became the Dagger pair assassin. And I tested this weapon until I got 100 kills. My verdict? Well, let me show you.
お前はもう死んでいる。何？
My go-to playstyle was hit and run. Stack up on Qs, close the distance, do big damage, run away, reset cooldowns, rinse and repeat. To close the distance, I use Shadow Edge. It's a skill shot, so of course it's a hit or miss. If I miss, I just run away and reset cooldowns. If they chase too much, I can use my E even without the Shadow Edge, because they have already closed the distance. This process is extremely telegraphed. As soon as you have 3 stacks, you are basically saying, "Excuse me, Mr. Opponent, can you please stand still while I land my Shadow Edge?" And of course they are not going to stand still and they will try to dodge it. So sometimes I throw the Shadow Edge while it only has 2 stacks, and sometimes I wait a bit longer until they stop dancing around. If the opponent has a defensive like Hunter Hood or Inferno Shield or something, they might try to pop it the moment I land my Shadow Edge. However, the Shadow Edge stuns the target for like a second and something, so if I hit it from a close distance, they cannot activate the defensive before my E is finished, so if they try, they just waste their defensive. To make sure I follow with my E as soon as possible, I start repeatedly and quickly smashing the E button on my keyboard, and I do this while I'm still flying towards them on my Shadow Edge. In a similar manner, you should be smashing the subscribe button under this video. If I land Shadow Edge from a far distance, the stun expires before I finish my E. Therefore, the opponent has enough time to pop a defensive, possibly a reflect of some kind, and make me very sad. Deathgivers can do anything that I can do, but better. Against melee weapons, I don't always need Shadow Edge. I can swap to dash because they have to close the distance eventually. I just have to make sure they don't swap to the same queue that I am on, because otherwise they could kite me better. And now I just have to do the classic missed experience of begging someone to fight me please. This particular player is too scared to pick a fair fight, so I have to waste my E to dismount them, and the moment they are off their horse, I pop my shoes and sprint away. I do this to reset my cooldowns and get my next E. Once it's up, I don't worry about telegraphing it too much, because they have no defensives and cannot do much against it. I pop my Inferno Shield to soak their cape and brawl, and they smartly disengage. Don't want to fight me when my shield is up, this is good play. Now I see them pop their mercenary jacket, so I disengage. I hit them with my E, and then I run away to reset both my cooldowns and their Q stacks on me, which I almost managed, but unfortunately they caught up on the last second and hit me with their E. Here I was waiting for all of my cooldowns to come back, my Inferno Shield and my boots. Now I'm about to do a big mistake here. I wanted to wait one more Q rotation before turning on them. They punish me by catching up to me when I have no stacks, so I'm forced to brawl with them with my Inferno Shield, and they do a big mistake by disengaging. I can just finish them with my E now. Let's watch that again. At this point, my shoots came back online, so I should have rushed in with my W and press E immediately. They catch up to me right as my stacks run out, so I try to disengage. But I disengage with my W instead of my boots, so they just catch on to me with no problems. And at this point, they see me pop my Inferno Shield, so their go-to reaction is to just run away and kite it out. Their muscle memory works against them now. Had they just popped their mercenary jacket and continue brawling even through my Inferno shield, they would be able to finish me before I get my 3 stacks back. Albion is very much about pressing your buttons correctly, which neither of us did in this fight. An important aspect of the Shadow Edge spell is that it provides an iframe. This is very useful against weapons like dual swords or battle bracers, as it can counter both of their E's. When playing in a free-for-all situations like these ones, I like to keep my distance. Ideally, I want my opponents to start fighting each other. Whoever drops to the lowest health becomes the juiciest target. Normally, I'd save my cowl to prevent my opponents from mounting up. That will not happen anytime soon, so I'll just use it off cooldown for cheap damage. By the way, I'm not chasing the bracers because I do not believe I could catch them. Here I'm just standing still with my Shadow Edge ready, as I'm expecting an E from them. And we just continue having a little bit of a Mexican standoff in here. None of us wants to commit too much because of the reasons just mentioned. Eventually the bracers ran out of nerves or patience, so now it's just me and the swords. I am watching them closely, getting ready to interrupt their E with my Shadow Edge just in time. The moment they pop their Hunter Hood, I don't want to brawl them anymore, so I just ran away, getting ready for my next combo. I'm a little slow with my Assassin jacket, but eventually I use it to counter their Mercenary jacket. Now their only chance of escaping is dodging my Shadow Edge, and luckily for me they just run in a straight line, so it's easy to land it and finish them off. Seeing an Occult Staff in the mists sounds like trolling, but this build actually makes sense. Arcane staffs struggle with mobility. The Occult Staff can solve this problem with its E. I opened with my Purity Cowl for some free damage. A better play would be to save it and use it to interrupt their cultist ropes. At this point I did not yet realize that they are playing them, so I'm just looking for an opening for a good Shadow Edge. I noticed the Bracer's rat dismounting, so I propose a gentleman's agreement. The good etiquette in Mists is to team up against the rat, then reset, and then continue with a proper fight. Of course, it's Albion, so you never know if people actually honor this good etiquette, but this guy was playing a Giga Chat weapon, so I knew he's going to be reasonable. In this case, we didn't kill the rat, it got away, but it didn't come back, so this is what a proper etiquette can do. We reset the fight and I start the same way. I dodge his Qs and I open with my Purity Cowl. I miss my Shadow Edge, so now it's time for me to just kite back and wait for it to reset its cooldown. The Occult switches target to this Nature Staff, which is just running around, so I realized that it's the Gentleman's Agreement and it still stands. We team up against this other rat, and this time we actually get to kill it. For the third time we reset, and once again I start the same way. I stack on Qs, I open with the Purity Cowl, I dodge his Qs, and I look for a good Shadow Edge. I spot a good opportunity while still only being on Q stacks. Since I landed it from a close distance, the Occult cannot possibly activate its Soldier Helmet in time, so the bubble can only save him from the bleed damage. Now, what took me too long to realize is that he's actually on cultist ropes, so my hit and run strategy won't work here, as he can just simply heal whatever damage I do while I do my run. So I go for a bold strategy and swap to a more brawly build. Killing this squirrel gives me 1 stack. Another squirrel, another stack. The Occult does an excellent job by kiting me around. And as you can probably tell, this really didn't go the way I planned. I wait in the invisibility until I have full 10 damage stacks and his E is gone. Then I do a weak single stack E and kite away. He immediately starts healing, so I can quickly interrupt it with my cowl. And being a greedy bastard, I decide to go all in instead of running away, and I win this just barely. GG. When dismounting near already dismounted opponents, I make sure to keep a good distance. Otherwise they could attack me while I'm still on the 5 seconds cooldown, as this carving sword tries to do. Luckily I dodge their E by just an inch, and instead of brawling, they space away for some reason, which suits me. They are too late with the parry strike, so I can just hide in my invisibility and space away again. Parry strike is otherwise a good counter. Had they popped it before my shadow edge, I would just unalive myself. Mobs in the mists are no joke, especially when fighting in low tiers as I am. Getting some serious damage here, so I tried to run away. Finally the carving understands that it should just stick on top of me and bash me over the head. And I do my best to stay alive here. It's very important I don't miss my next combo, otherwise I'm cooked. Luckily they make it very easy to hit. I change my strategy when fighting fire staffs or cursed staffs. These matchups are just a DPS check, so I go full DPS and full defensives, no kiting. This is the reason why I carry geek potions in my inventory. A typical fire staff player will just become a turret and just shoot non-stop. So the single Inferno shield is enough to counter that. Thus the matchup is a pretty brain dead DPS check. One thing that's good to keep in mind is that Shadow Edge also interrupts, so this can counter the fire staff E pretty nicely. Fire staffs have 0 mobility, so it's also possible to do the hit and run strategy with them, but I have found the full DPS strategy to be more reliable. Do note that the Geek Potion allows me to simply walk through their firewall, so if I see them swap to that, I save my Geek Potion just for that occasion. Dual swords in cloth armor. I swap my head to force field, as I really do not want to stand close to these weapons. Here I notice that they are baiting my Shadow Edge, so I pop it at second stack, then I do all I can to get away. When fighting against Stalkerhood, it's usually best to swap chests to Inferno Shield, but in this case I didn't and it worked out. In this last brawl I could have used a Geek Potion and I was too greedy, almost cost me the match, almost. My build complements my playstyle, therefore most items either help me close the distance or get away. Assassin Jacket, it's cheap and it lets me kite. Another option would be either Robe of Purity or Face Scale Robe, but both of these are rather expensive. Any leather shoes on Refreshing Sprint. For food I had better results with beef stew, but omelette or eel stew would also be a good choice. If I'm feeling extra frisky, I take sticky potions, as these are both a defensive and spacing tool. Otherwise, healing potions do the job just fine. I always keep a geek potion in my inventory for swaps. That's for cape, in this build it works better than Ava cape. And finally, for the head, either Duskweaver helmet or Cowl of Purity or just a mage cowl if I wanna go cheap. On the weapon, I go the Life Steal passive, as other passives would require me to do auto attacks, and ideally I don't wanna be doing those, I just hit and dip. All of this I usually run in 5.1. Pros and cons of playing the Dagger pair. Pro number 1, it's really fun. You get to roleplay as this cool assassin that jumps out of the shadows, does big damage and then jumps back. Quite often, what finishes your opponents is not the burst damage from your E, but the subsequent damage over time. So it's like in those anime scenes where the hero slices the antagonist takes a few steps, and then they collapse. And that's about it. That's the most pros in this weapon. As for the cons, well, there are several. Most notably, it's quite hard to pull this off. The weapon is quite difficult to play, its strategy is obvious, its moves are telegraphed, very easy to predict. It relies on skill shots, and landing a skill shot is something that's only 50% under your control, as the other 50% are whether your opponent dodges it or not. All things considered, I found it quite difficult to square up to other, more meta weapons. What's more, this very same gameplay can be better achieved with a different weapon, which is the Deathgivers. You can literally play the very same strategy, and the cooldown on your E is much shorter, and the E itself already has some mobility included in it, so it's just easier to get away. This fight against a lower tier opponent demonstrates this perfectly. Do note that most weapons in Albion have their use in some form of content or another. For instance, I think that Dagger pair shines the most in duo Hellgates. But when speaking strictly for solo PvP content, I would put Dagger pair into C tier. Let me know if you agree with this down below in the comments.